Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I'm Mark Stay, and as always, a whopping great thanks to everyone who keeps this podcast on the road. That includes our academics on the Bestseller Academy and our patrons over on Patreon. If you want to get access to hundreds of hours of extra material, including a very good chat with our special guest today, then pop over to bestsellerexperiment.com/support, and you can find out how you get access to all these extra deep dives and extra episodes. If you want to get into the Academy and have me and Mr. D as your tutors, can you imagine such a thing? Pop to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. Links are all in the show notes. Mr. D, how are you today?
Oh, I'm so excited about today's interview, Mark. I'm absolutely buzzed. But before we dive in, I need to tell you a very quick story, which our guests might be able to help me with today, because I was putting out the bins earlier, the wheelie bins. And in my rush to get to this interview, I decided to put on my daughter's size 6 Crocs. And now I'm a size 10, 11, right? So that's, you can just imagine me, gravel driveway in these little kind of like pink Crocs. And as I went out the gate, I was pulling the bins through, I pulled the gate and then it kind of sliced the back of my heel off. So, and I haven't looked yet. You know, when you do something like that and it really hurts, and you're just like, I'm just not going to look at that till later. But I might be asking, I guess, how I can reattach it later on. But anyway, I digress. But no, I'm very excited. And this week's been a bit random because a lot of work on the non-fiction project. Great. Again, bit of a link to today's interview. Excellent. Let's dive in and I should just check in with you. You're having a book launch soon, aren't you?
Yeah, but my book's out. We're recording this on Wednesday. Book's out tomorrow. Book launch is on I think it's the 26th, Tuesday the 26th at Waterstones, Canterbury. Link in the show notes. It's all there. But yeah, I'm going to FantasyCon this weekend. The next week or so is just a bit of a blur, frankly. But yeah, lots of fun. Going to be lots of fun. Let's get to our special guest. This is why people have tuned in. Our special guest is none other than Suzie Edge. Suzie Edge trained as a molecular cell biologist before moving to clinical medicine to spend more time talking to people rather than just bugs in test tubes. She worked as a junior doctor and always on the lookout for gory historical details. Suzie loves telling stories of how we have treated our human bodies in life and in death. She's a smash on TikTok. We did a deep dive on that, episode 405, talking about TikTok. I'm sure that's going to come up again and again. I'll put a link in the show notes. Her first book, Mortal Monarchs, was an absolute smash hit, and coming very soon, 28th of September, is Vital Organs. We're going to talk about that, all the future books that are coming. Suzie Edge, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Oh, I'm so good, Mark. Thank you so much for inviting me on for a chat.
Oh, we're so excited, aren't we, Mr. D? This is going to be great.
We certainly are, Suzie, and we should also say, Suzie, you've been with the podcast, listener, and a supporter of the podcast for how many years now? Because I remember almost early TikTok days, you were talking about it on the BXP team.
I don't know, because I've probably been back to the beginning of the podcast a couple of times. Genuinely, I go back now and again and have a good giggle at the famous bollocking and all the other, the great. Because it's so inspirational, and it makes me get off my bum and go and do some stuff. It really does, and put that on the back of your book. It makes me get off my bum.
I think for us,
I've been hanging around for a while.
It's so great though for us to kind of travel with you and journey with you in your author experience. Like we've been going, I guess it's nearly 6 years, isn't it, Mark? Now we're coming up to, and when we first started out, obviously we were just like, giving it large as best we could, but like to have had all of this time now to see all these authors kind of develop in their journey. You've been a massive inspiration within that group of authors, and we're so excited to talk about your new book, because your new book is coming out at the end of this month, isn't it?
It's been a bit of a whirlwind, this one, and I think that's because the first one comes out and it takes a long time, and it feels like even from selling the book to getting it out onto the shelves, it takes forever. And this one, I had the idea the day I handed in the first one, and I phoned my agent, and she's like, "That's lovely. Have you had a cup of tea? Have you sat down?
Do you want to take a day off, maybe?"
Yeah. I was like, "No, let's go." And I had the idea then, and it was a tough slog, because we agreed with the we agreed with the publishers that it was going to be the same time frame, and the book comes out the same day as the first one did last year. And of course, I've got all the other publicity and everything else going on as well, and I'm trying to think about both of them, and that's quite hard to do as well. But yeah, it's called Vital Organs: A History of the World's Most Famous Body Parts, and it's coming out in a couple of weeks.
Well, I was looking at the blurb. It said Louis XIV's rear end inspired the British national anthem. Queen Victoria's armpit led the development of antiseptics. Robert Jenkins' ear started a war. I mean, this is so much fun. These are the little icky bits of history that just fascinate us. So tell us about Louis XIV's rear end, please.
Oh, well, my Google search history is just hilarious. But yeah, Louis XIV had a sort of painful something going on his rear end, and he prodded it and poked it, and it just got worse and worse and turned into an abscess. And from there, the physicians had a look, and they poked it with red hot pokers, and they put poultices on, and they put herbs in, and nothing really helped, and it just got worse, and it turned into a fistula, which is a channel, if you like, from one open bit to another. So he basically developed an extra hole down there, if you get my drift, and it was seeping and very, very sore. And eventually the physicians thought, well, we need help here from the surgeons, the lowly surgeons as they were at the time. They weren't university educated. They were in the streets choppy. And they got a surgeon in, and he had a look between the king's legs and thought, need to do some practice here. So he went off to the streets of Paris, and he found people in the prisons and the hospitals and what have you with similar conditions, and he practiced on them until he developed some tools and an operation. And he went back to the king, and he sat between the king's legs for 3 or 4 hours with no anesthetic, no antiseptic, and he sort of unroofed this fistula, and he cleaned it all out, and it was a success. And he was given loads of money and loads of land, and he never operated again. So it's the dream, isn't it? Just, So that was that. The surgeons went on to gain a lot more from the king then, and a lot more recognition, and so started to be recognised more. Because that's what you get from recognition, isn't it? And I tell you the story about the anthem, but I can't remember it.
No, you see, that's what we call a teaser. That's what we call a teaser. It's absolutely brilliant.
That's exactly it. Yes, you're right. I did that on purpose. I'm teasing.
Absolutely.
You have to buy the book.
Yes.
Brilliant. Now, there was also something about Hitler's testicle as well, which I know, like, there's something about the Royal Albert Hall. I can't remember the whole thing, but
I'm not going to start singing for you.
No, I was going to say we could all, but I don't actually know the history behind any of that. Is it linked to that? Song?
Yeah, it is. It's just a story that won't go away, and it was a big propaganda thing. I mean, if you listen to the rest of the story, it goes on to talk about Himmler and Goering as well, I think, and those guys don't come up so much. But yeah, there's this idea that he had lost one either on the Somme when he was injured, or he had been doing something that he shouldn't have been doing with a goat when he was a child and lost it then. And so there's all these stories that, I mean, they get worse and worse, don't they? The more bad things you want to say about somebody, you can talk about what might have happened to his testicle. But of course, there was no evidence in the end because of the way he ended up burned, and actually he was only recognised by a teeth plate and jaw, and the Russians said that he was missing one, but there was nothing there to go on. It's all just propaganda.
It's crazy.
Shall we get this back on track? Let's.
It is on track. What are you talking about?
This is absolutely on track. So far we've talked about pain in the arse and a load of bollocks. I mean, it's going.
Yes, we're on course, aren't we? Let's talk about where it all started, because as I understand it, this all started in lockdown for you. You'd done a master's degree in modern history. And I think also you were having conversations with your kids about medical history and the gory stuff and horrible histories and things like that. How did that and TikTok lead to the first book, Mortal Monarchs?
I was telling the stories on TikTok, and I was even developing them all. Some of them, they were only 60 seconds long, but I was writing them in a kind of beginning, middle, and end, and tell the story, and really as if I was writing something a lot longer. and they were going down really well. And I do a lot of videos that are behind the scenes kind of things as well. And during lockdown, there was nothing else that I was doing. So I was just doing those. And I mentioned a few times that I was turning it into a book, or I was thinking about a book. I had the idea for Mortal Monarchs whilst I was doing my master's. I was kind of sneaking out the hospital along to the history department because it's it's a university hospital, and would always be like, "Oh no, I was just with that patient or that theatre or whatever," and I was sneaking about in history. Yeah, so I said on TikTok, I was making videos saying I'd love to turn this into a book, and people were suggesting it, and suggesting a podcast as well. And I said one day that this would be great. I'd love to do this. I'll have to write it and then get it off to agents. And then I was very, very lucky. I landed on my feet because Emily Glenister, who's an agent with DHH in London, sent me a DM one day and said, "Let's talk." And I did, and I signed on the dotted line. And so at that point, the book wasn't written. I had a fair idea, but it wasn't done. And we wrote a proposal and sold on that with a couple of chapters that were, a couple of sample chapters. And that then, I then got the job, if you like, and I sat down and wrote it.
So fiction authors will be listening to this sort of grinding their teeth, because when you write fiction, you generally have to write the whole thing. You have to prove you can write a book before you can sell it to, even show it to an agent. But with nonfiction, it's very different. Nonfiction very often, and I used to sit in acquisitions meetings at publishers and whatever, you'd get that proposal, which was usually a chapter by chapter breakdown and a couple of sample chapters. Was that the sort of thing that you were pitching to publishers with then?
Yeah, and of course, with a book like Mortal Monarchs, my first one, it's relatively easy to write a chapter breakdown because there was a chapter per monarch. It went back 1,000 years. I didn't have to worry about plot lines or, the inciting incident or anything like that. Or of course, I had to do that within each chapter, but I didn't have to do that for the chapter breakdowns. And so that was fairly easily done. And with a growing online presence as well, that was appealing to them, I suppose. There were a few different ones that were interested, but I ended up with the guys who were really interested in the idea of online publishing, online publicity, etc., which I was really into. So yeah, that's how it went down. And then of course I had to sit down and write the thing, which was terrifying because there's a huge amount of trust from them, isn't there, in that when they say, go for it.
So just to confirm then, so you got a DM from an agent who was interested in working with you. Is that how they came to you rather than you were chasing them?
Yeah, that's how it happens. And my level of guilt is huge. I feel very bad putting it that way. But, sometimes that's the way around it. Some people just aren't the usual send in a manuscript and be found. Some people are found in other ways. And I've been very, very lucky. I mean, there was a bit of hard work in there as well. But
lots of hard work. Yeah, no.
The harder you work, the luckier you get, Suzie. You know that. But I find that fascinating because I always talk about the 99%, which is what everyone does, the traditional route, and then there's the 1% that do it the complete opposite way. And I've often talked about that with in the coaching. It's like if you can get them to come to you, if you've laid down all of the opportunities, you started to kind of work. I mean, I know you've been doing TikTok for 3-4 years now, isn't it? It's 5 years, right? So that it's always like everyone's like, oh, overnight success, and we should also say, I mean, 400. I think I was looking today, it's around 410,000 followers you've now got, which is absolutely bonkers, and it's probably growing. Is it growing exponentially, would you say, now in terms of like growth per day? Or
it varies, but I have a bit of a sort of self formula, if you like. I know what's going to do well, and when I'm in the mood, when I have the time, and when I can face what's coming, because I'll tell you, it's not easy to deal with a viral video. Then I put them out. I put one out a couple of days ago, and therefore I put on 12 or 13,000 in the last 48 hours. So I know that that's going to happen when I do such a video. So I was willing at the weekend to put up, or a couple of days ago, to deal with that. But yeah,
like you have to prepare for the viral kind of like tsunami that happens. Wow. Love it.
And there definitely is one, and it can be challenging if I'm not in the mood for it. So I definitely have to be in the mood. But actually, I'll just nip back to what you were saying about my agent getting in touch with me. She did say to me, I know we had this conversation before, Mr. Stay. I said, the first thing she said to me was, "So you want to write?" do you want to write fiction or non-fiction? And I chickened out, actually, and I said non-fiction. I felt like it was chickening out at the time. I didn't say that a few months later when I was writing the bloody thing. But I felt like I was chickening out, and I said non-fiction. But of course, maybe that's a good way around to. I understand far more about the publishing industry now that I could face going at them with fiction.
And just going back to the idea of being lucky or not lucky and all that kind of stuff. I mean, non-fiction editors do operate by scouring social media for rising stars. The number of times we had acquisitions meetings where they would say, look, no one's approached this person. Back then it was usually Facebook groups. They say, look, they got a massive Facebook group and they're talking about parenting, or they're talking about this special kind of food or whatever. And the editor would hunt these people down and approach them and say, look, are you interested in doing a book? And that, like, as you say, comes off the back of the success of, one, your expertise, but also the way that you nurture and interact that community as well. And I know you do see things occasionally in writers groups online where they go, oh no, I don't have a big social media following. If you're writing fiction, it kind of doesn't matter. But if you're writing non-fiction, it was always part of the conversation. They would go, okay, how big's their Facebook group? Is it growing? You know, that kind of thing. So I'm fascinated.
Now he tells me.
Yeah. I'm fascinated to hear about this, the fact that you've now sort of got the gist of when something's going to be big. Is it just the kind of video that you put out that you know is going to be, you know, I'm thinking of almost like bait and fish, you know, you put something in there and all the piranhas come out. So you kind of know what's going to be big now, do you?
Yeah, I don't chase the piranhas, but they do come when the tiny little screw ups. Or the other day I wrote the word Elizabeth. I had a video where I was writing, and you could see what I was writing. I wrote the word Elizabeth, and the H didn't have a big bump at the bottom. It was fairly flat. And the number of people that have told me that I can't spell the word Elizabeth, which is hilarious because it's my middle name.
You're getting trolled on Facebook for your spelling.
Yeah, it's my daughter's middle name. It's my mother's name. It's my grandmother's name. It's my middle name. So, you know, I could spell the word Elizabeth, but that really brought people out. I don't put those in deliberately. But I do leave them sometimes because I think I often do not talk about Lady Jane Grey because that winds people up when they comment. I often kind of miss out certain figures that I know are going to wind people up because people really, really, really want me to talk about their interest, and you know that's cool. But I don't tend to go after the piranhas, but I do know what's popular with my group. And
yeah. And it's your group as well. I mean, everyone's going to say, oh, what's the magic formula, Suzie? But actually, you've learnt about your audience, which is unique to you. If somebody else tried that, it might not work for them. But I find it fascinating that you kind of, you know how the engine works now in so many different working ways. And then, you know, like you say, you have to plan for those big videos. Did you know, Suzie, I was looking up on Amazon today, just checking out the new book listing, which I noticed future books are already listed as well. But I don't know if you know this, but you're currently number one in royal biography, and the person in second place is Prince Harry with his book Spare. So I'm just wondering, did you know that? Did you know that you're outselling?
No, I've not looked for ages.
I was just wondering if he's actually contacted you.
Who's that? Sorry, who's that?
Yeah,
Harry?
Prince Harry. Yeah, Harry.
It doesn't ring a bell.
I was just wondering if he'd reached out to offer, you know, ask for any sales tips on how to shift more books.
Or maybe some writing tips. You might want to try writing one himself.
Oh, to the tower.
Oh, let's hope time travel doesn't exist. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, isn't it? It's interesting to see where your books on monarchs are showing up.
Yeah, and that actually is another thing that I can influence and manipulate almost my Amazon rankings. Isn't that mad? If I mention a book and say, go to this place on Amazon, then I know that I will, you know, the first book, Mortal Monarchs, I think it had a front cover 9 months before publication. You know, when we announced it, it went to a number one bestseller then on Amazon. And then the second one did exactly the same thing. I think that was 8 months before publication. The children's book a couple of weeks ago, that doesn't even have a front cover. That went to a number one on Amazon on the day we announced it. So yeah, I can I can manipulate that as well. Which is wild. Because we've had this conversation before about how numbers don't really match sales, but I feel like they do for me. You know? I can play with it.
I'm just going to pop out. I've got to post all my books to Suzie so she can recommend them. I'll be back in a minute.
But I do have influence in that regard, and that to me is absolutely wild. I didn't chase that, but that's a product of it. And I get sent I get a book of a week in the post now. They come thick and fast. I've had some people that are getting in touch with me, names that I have followed forever, and I fall off my chair every time. I think, oh, you want my following, do you?
That's
it's nice.
Amazing.
It's cool. I just feel, it's wild.
Does it all feel a little bit unreal? Does it all feel a little bit?
It does. I mean, the thing is, I'm not selling millions of books, but which would feel unreal for sure. But just more than 2 feels unreal to me. It does. It feels very strange because I know, and I'm not about town all the time. I'm not meeting people in London or whatever. I'm sitting in a little cottage in the Highlands watching this all happen. That's the sort of surreal bit.
Brilliant stuff. Now, Suzie, I don't know if you heard on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, but I announced that I was going to be writing a non-fiction book over the next year, which is incredibly scary. But I noticed that you are an avid non-fiction reader as well. And there was a TikTok shelfie, I love that word, about the books on your shelf. So having had a love in non-fiction in terms of your kind of like background reading, did that lead you to be interested in wanting to write non-fiction?
There was a book that I picked up. I was about 14 years old, which says a lot about me, but it was called How We Die. It was by a surgeon called Sherwin B. Newland. It's a New York surgeon. And it just went through the body and all the different ways one can meet one's end. And I thought it was absolutely fascinating. And in a way, that was a book that I recreated in Mortal Monarchs through the lens of all the monarchs. And I fell in love with that. I fell in love with the idea that one could be a surgeon and write in that way. And that was what I wanted to do. So I've definitely ticked that box. That set me off for sure. Brilliant. And then there are so more. I mean, that's you're not the only one to mention that loving with non-fiction. That was just my writing shed shelves, because there's other books around the house that are not necessarily non-fiction. But yeah, I'll often be turning around and taking a book off and looking something up when I'm writing or making a TikTok or whatever.
Yeah. What do you most love about writing non-fiction?
I think it's there's just the sheer surprise and love of finding new things. And I think that's the historian in me as well, just the turning over a page and reading a new story that just makes me go, what? That's amazing. I've got to tell everybody this. I think that's the thing. And
you also have the kind of content you write about. There's such a rich history of topics that you could cover. And I think a lot of non-fiction authors, I think fiction authors as well, are in the same boat, but I think particularly non-fiction, because there's so much out there in the world and beyond to talk about. How do you choose to focus and drill down on a very, very specific kind of topic for the content of a book?
I think that just comes out of the fact that I am a doctor before a historian. I was a doctor first. I was a medic first. I spent a very long time dealing with human bodies, and in those non-fiction books, most of them are medical, aren't they? I spent a lot of time in there. So that's my main interest. That's the thing that makes me say, wow, and sit up and start telling those stories. Coupled together with history, suddenly it niches down a little bit. And I do have an idea for book number 3, which is coming. And again, it's just that stuff that makes me go, wow, and sit up and want to tell people about it, because I know that other people are going to be like, wow, that's amazing. None of my books are particularly controversial or trying to tell people how to do something, or, this isn't like how to lose weight in 100 different ways. It's none of that. It's just fun stories.
You mentioned with Mortal Monarchs, the chapter structure was essentially you're going through various monarchs through history, so you didn't have to worry too much about an overarching narrative. But with Vital Organs, how did you plan that out, and how did you structure your chapters? Was there an obvious way of planning that one out?
Initially, I did look. There's three different ways I thought about it. The first one was that I'm leaving Britain. Well, there's a lot of British stories in there, and going all around the world. So I thought about doing a trip around the world in 50 body parts. And then I thought chronologically, it became more difficult to do because it wasn't a set. It wasn't a set thing. Things, and the other way, which was more obvious to me, as a previous clinician, was to do it the way I would examine a body, start at the top and work my way down. So that was how I went. I went with, we start at the head and work our way down to the toes.
Excellent stuff. Now, book titles, like we get one shot of book titles. And again, there's usually I remember when Mark and I were trying to, work out the book titles for Back to Reality, we had a spreadsheet, didn't we, Mark, of 200 different ideas. How for you? Obviously with the two books you've written, plus all the other books that have already got names attached to them now. What was your process for that? Was it something that just came to you? Was it something that was a big discussion with the agent, the publisher? Was it a shortlisting process?
The very first working title for Mortal Monarchs was called How to Kill the King.
Oh.
And I thought that was quite fun until one day I was driving along. I live just right next to Balmoral Castle. And one day I was driving along, listening to The Killers of all things, driving very fast, and had to slam on the brakes when a little old guy with white hair in tweed was walking across the road. And I thought that I was about to drive into the King, or the Prince of Wales as he was. And it went through my head, I'm about to kill the King. And then I thought, oh man, if that actually happened, if I'd hit him,
could you imagine? They
would have been going through my laptop, wouldn't they? They would have been finding all these stories and they would have found this, this file called How to Kill the King and everything. And I thought, I don't know, maybe it's not so great. I have a wonderful WhatsApp group of doctor friends, doctor mum friends. It's very niche, and we would banter all day. And I put it out to them, and they came back with the funniest ideas. And I think it was Mortal Monarchs and Vital Organs were both mine in the end, which I'm really proud of. Both my ideas. So yeah, happy with that.
Talking about royal deaths or potential deaths. Now, in the run-up to the publication of Mortal Monarchs, and this you brought this up on the Bestseller Experiment Facebook group, Her Majesty the Queen died, and you were in a bit of a quandary. And that week must have been, it was bananas for everyone, but doubly so for yourself. Take us through that week. What happened there?
I felt a little bit bad about bringing it up on the BXP group because it was in the morning. She wasn't announced dead yet. And I was all very much me.
No, that's true.
It was
I hadn't been announced yet.
What am I going to do? I had been that morning, the 8th of September, I had been on a podcast, a History Hit podcast, and we were having such a giggle talking about these stories. And I put the phone down or said goodbye, the Zoom wave, we did that. And suddenly my phone rang and it was the producers. And I thought, oh, what have I done? I'm in trouble. First reaction to everything, isn't it? And I picked it up and they said, do you know, have you seen the news? I said, I've hardly seen the news. I've been looking at you for the last hour, And they said, just hang fire. Don't announce anything. Don't make your videos. Just wait. Go and watch the news first. And I was really down because, I'd spent years coming up with this idea. And of course, it was on my mind. It was on our minds. I'd had these discussions with the publishers. What are we going to do? And it was very much a question of, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And suddenly we're teetering at the end of this bridge going down. We got to cross it. How are we going to do that? And of course, there are rules. They weren't allowed to, there are rules after the monarch dies. The publishers, they had to wind their necks in for a bit, as did I. And my box of books, I knew that they were on the way. My editor had said, we've sent you the books, I think, a couple of days before. So when they arrived, it was a question of, that's nice, thanks. Opened them on the dining room table with my husband, looked at them and went, that's cool. Can't tell anyone. Have a sniff, but put them back in the box. And it was, so that day, I made a video saying to all these Americans, particularly, who were just like, give us the information, what's happening. And I said, look, I'm not going to make content about the death of the Queen. I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to go down that route. I could jump up and down and say, hey, the Queen's dead, buy my book. But it just wasn't in me. it wasn't my way, and I decided to just leave it be. I did make a few videos later on when the death certificate came out, because I thought, well, apart from anything else, it's out there in the world. So if everyone else is commenting on it, then I can as well. What was interesting was, whilst I was making that video about the death certificate, I looked closely at, because I had it behind me in a green screen. I looked closely at it and saw that the guy the doctor who had signed the death certificate was my GP. And
no way.
Yeah. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to bring that up with him, as long as we're not in the middle of a smear test or something. And
did you spell Elizabeth correctly?
Oh, definitely. So yeah, it was an interesting week, and it went on. Of course, once the evening came, it was about 6 o'clock or something. They announced the death of the Queen, and I was like, fine, 'tis what it is, and everything. This dark cloud descended on us, and actually, it was bucketing it down here that day. And I went along to Balmoral. I took my mother-in-law, and everyone was under umbrellas, and it was raining. It was real. It was real movie stuff. This is a sad moment. We're going to make it rain. And it was a long couple of weeks waiting for that to smooth over. And then I started jumping up and down and going, hey guys, guess what? And I had accusing emails and rants at me, people who thought that I had written, edited, proofread, printed, delivered this book in that time.
You say that, Suzie. I worked in bookselling when Diana died.
Oh, crikey. Yeah, okay.
And do you remember, I don't know if you remember, but we had and really it was, I think Orion were the first with a tribute, air quotes, book of Diana, where they packaged photos together, and we got hundreds of them in, and they flew out. And they were just, the publishers did turn them around in weeks. These kind of tribute books, and it was
so they can do it. What you're saying is they can do it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I always remember the
pull
story.
That one out.
I always remember the story of Richard Branson before he did his air balloon flight. A crazy one around the world, where he's trying to break the world record. He walked past a van, a TV outside broadcast van. And he saw a guy editing stuff on a screen, and he saw pictures, and it said R.I.P. Richard Branson, and it had like that year's date. And so and this is what they do. They prepare everything in advance. So when somebody actually dies, and in the case of the Queen, that all of that footage would have been prepared for years, and then they just add the very last bit and top and tail it with the fact that she'd passed away, and then they'd be putting it out that evening, because there's no way you could put together all that footage. But the fact that, obviously you weren't preparing for that. It was just incredible timing that it happened right when you were about to put your book out. But it's amazing that I think that's why people probably think, he's just whacked it together and pushed it out. But as people realize now, you just can't do that with a book of your quality. And the research that goes into it is phenomenal. Absolutely.
One thing that I was really proud of was that because of that, there were, in those categories, the royal categories that you mentioned earlier, there were a lot of books about Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh, and all those books all suddenly shot up the charts as well. So to be competing with those as someone who wasn't known was really brilliant.
Yeah. No,
it's a real once in a lifetime, right?
When I was at Headline, we had a book on the Queen Mother. That you're talking about news broadcasters will have that biography ready. We had a book on the Queen Mother that was ready to print, except for the final chapter as well. That had sat for years, ready to go at the last minute. So it is. There is a whole industry behind that.
Whenever I think of the Queen Mum, I always think of the spitting image puppet. Living forever. I'm gonna live forever. Brilliant. Now, As a little preview, we have listeners' questions, which we're going to go through in the extended edition of this podcast. But we have a listener question from Jeff White, which we'd love to ask you. What was the moment you felt you'd made it as an author?
Oh, goodness me. There's been some pretty brilliant moments. Pretty brilliant. Those words don't go together, do they, Suzie? Come on, you're a writer. Sort yourself out. There's been some
pretty brilliant. It's very British of you, right?
That is right. There have been some amazing moments. The first time I walked into Waterstones and saw a book where it wasn't. I'd seen the book in local bookshops, and it was there because my friends had gone in and said, "Can you stock this book?" And so that's nice seeing it in a bookshop. But walking into Waterstone. I saw the book in foils on the front desk in London, Charing Cross Road, a couple of weeks ago, and that felt pretty damn cool. Just that was a dream come true. I felt that another dream come true was very early on. My publicist had sent a video of the book coming off the printers, and actually to see it there, that was a pretty cool moment. Going down to Goldsborough Books sold a lot, and to go down and sit there and sign those books. And what happened was I had been in signing at the same time as Richard Osman had been in, and his pile of books was sitting there. And as I was signing them, they were being put by his. So I took a photograph of that, as mine were piling up next to his, and made the pile look bigger in the photograph. And actually, the Goldsborough told me that I had far more dedication requests for the book than anyone else had ever had. So that felt really cool. So there's been loads of fun things. Yeah. I have seen that question actually on the VXV group, and he does mention that bizarre AI biography.
Yes, well, this is it. Jeff's full question this is what I was going to say. What is the moment Suzie felt she'd made it as an author, and why is it when that AI-generated biography of her appeared on Amazon? Now, listeners, I'm going to put a link to this in the show. Don't you dare buy it, but it's a book called Suzie Edge, Biography of the Legend, and I'm just going to read you the blurb here now. The cover is really something to see. Suzie Edge is a captivating and inspiring biography that unveils the extraordinary life of Suzie Edge, a trailblazing figure whose journey of passion and perseverance has left an indelible mark on the world. And what's amazing about this whole blurb is it's effusive, and it doesn't really mention a single tangible fact about you or your career or anything.
Well, I was worried. I opened it thinking there was going to be, what school I went to and, telling everyone my date of birth and all this stuff. I was quite concerned. And when I opened it, not a thing. So part of me was like, got it. And another part of me was like, actually, that's quite good.
We should just explain, for people that aren't in the BXP team who haven't heard about what's happened. One day, randomly, this book appeared on Amazon called Suzie Edge, Biography of a Legend. It wasn't obviously written by you, and we then discovered it was written by AI. So when did you first find out? Did you find out about it through someone else, or did you come across it on Amazon? How did it happen?
I had a bit of a school reunion with some old friends. I was down in England and we got together. It was a beautiful day. We were sitting outside a pub and we'd all had quite a lot of cider. And one of my friends pulled my book out of her bag and said, "Can you sign it?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Yeah, I bought it on Amazon. It was next to that weird biography of you." And I was like, "What?" And of course, I thought that because we were all happily under the weather. Yeah, that as well. Happily, we'd had a few.
Refreshed.
Yes. Yeah. That she was just joking, like, haha, because they were all joking. They were all taking the piss out of their old school friend. And I thought nothing of it. And then later on, I did the whole going onto Amazon to see what was happening with the ranking for the new book. And it was there. And I thought, that's kind of me. I say kind of, because the picture, the AI generated picture, which is taken from a bad TikTok video, is just, it's priceless. And then I got it in the post. A friend bought it, the hard copy, and sent it in the post to me. So it's on my bookshelf.
Yeah, I saw it on your shelfie.
It's sitting there.
And I've got, I hope you're not too upset, but I haven't actually read it, Suzie, but I'm kind of curious. Obviously, you flick through it. Like, what's inside it? Does it actually say, is it, because this is AI generated, folks. This is something that somebody's just, and what does it say anything about your life in it?
Not absolutely nothing at all. It really just repeats chapter after chapter what Mark just read. It's almost like a tease. It's like, we're going to tell you all this amazing stuff, and uses long words, and it's really, it does throw up a lot of questions, doesn't it? I mean, how many of those must there be sitting on Amazon? And we have these endless discussions about AI and what it can do, and I use ChatGPT to help me with things, but I certainly haven't written any wild, absolutely empty biographies. But there are words. There are words in it. They just, none of them actually talk about me at all.
it's just mad, isn't it? I think for me, the problem with it, massive problem with it, is obviously when you type in Suzie Edge to find your books, it appears like, just below your books. And if somebody's really into you as an author and they buy that book, they're going to be like, what is this? And
yeah, I mean, that would annoy me.
How would you deal with that, though, as the author? Do you have to kind of go out there? Because you don't want to promote it. I mean, we shouldn't really be talking about it, should we, on the podcast? It's going to go into number one.
That sounds good. And, people have messaged me and said, what's this about? And who's this person that's written this book and all that sort of stuff. And I have made a video on TikTok saying just what we've been saying, that it's vacuous nonsense. But yeah, I think that, should I go looking for anything about Mr. James Purefoy? I found a biography and I thought, oh, yeah, I'll get that. And then I found that was in it. I'd probably be a bit annoyed, but I'm not sure I'd go after him for it. But then that's just me. I say that knowing that there are some people out there who probably would get annoyed with me. But, I can't keep everybody happy, can we?
Well, exactly. And it's one of those things that's going to run and run in terms of the conversations about AI and the challenges and the brilliant things that it's going to help authors with as well. But yeah, absolutely fascinating stuff.
I think I would be a little bit more less jokey about it and a little bit more hesitant about it were it to have any information, any personal information. Suddenly if it was talking about my kids or my husband or, as I say, my date of birth or where I went to school or all these things that are personal, I think I might be a bit less jokey about it. But because it's completely empty, I'm just like, okay.
Yeah. Although your husband did appear on a TikTok the other day, I believe, and it was a smash hit. So tell us about that.
He said one word, didn't he?
He said one word. I've always kept him at arm's length because he's not on TikTok, and he wasn't on Facebook for a very long time, and I didn't post pictures of him because I felt that was unfair, and only when he joined Facebook that I thought that was fair game. and so TikTok's the same, and so I don't share things about him on there. Very occasionally I do because and this is maybe a conversation we'll get onto, but very occasionally I do, just to shut people off, because everyone questions my sexuality because of my hair and my deep voice and my love for rugby, and so those things come up now and again, and I try and dispel those myths, but it just creates more. But the other day somebody had asked a funny question. I think it was, does he feel intimidated by his amazing wife? I think that was the question.
Yes.
So I turned the camera around and I went through to him and I said, do you feel intimidated? And he looked up from his book and he went, no, and went back to his book. And that was it. And suddenly, thousands of views later, people just wanting more. Well, thanks. 5 years I've been creating on TikTok. He turns up, says one word, scowls at me and goes back to his book, and suddenly he's a star.
Brilliant stuff. Brilliant. Well, listen, folks, we're gonna dive into an extended edition of this podcast where we've got a ton. I think almost marked the most number of listener questions. We actually had to go through the list and edit them, Suzie. This is like how many questions we had. But if you would like to join us on the extended, if you're a member of the Academy or a patron, we're going to be delving a bit more into TikTok and Suzie's incredible success on that. We're going to ask a few questions about how you started out as an author. And also a big question that keeps coming up was this idea of how do you balance writing versus social media? How do you juggle the time? So if you'd like to dive in with us, then pop over to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and sign up to become a patron or the Academy member. And we'll see you on the other side. What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. So, Mark, let's talk about socials and the wins this week.
So on the 200 words a day challenge, we had a lovely note from Sheila Crosby. Sheila's been one of those people. She's on Twitter at Sheila Crosby 403 every day there with me, logging her 200 words. And she says, I finished the first draft of Happily Ever After. Love that title.
Great title.
I'm gonna ignore it for a month so I can reread with fresh eyes. Meanwhile, I'm writing pirate stories, 350 words today. See, that's how you do it, folks.
Yeah.
Bank it, get it in there and move on to something else.
Sounds to me like that book needs to be out by Easter.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And on the Academy, Katie Bell, she's only been here a couple of days, and she says she's had a cover reveal already for her book, A Blend of Magic, which looks absolutely brilliant. It's the sort of thing, if you like Witches of Woodville, I think you might like A Blend of Magic. So I'll put a link in the show notes for that. She says, it's my cover reveal for A Blend of Magic, had lots of positive feedback and a few pre-orders, which weren't from friends. So a huge win. That, I mean, you were talking earlier, Suzie, about the fact that when you started seeing your book in shops that your friends hadn't put there. It's a big milestone, isn't it, when you realise there's life outside your friend circle.
It's huge. Well done. It feels really great. Great.
And then
I just say before we dive in, I've got to say something about Katie, which is absolutely brilliant. When we did the Academy kind of like an open evening, and actually Katie came to that, the first thing that she told me, and Mark and I were doing this together, the first thing she told me is she said, I said, oh, because she mentioned that she likes to write witchy stories and things like that. And I said, oh, have you heard about Mark Stay's like witch book? Oh, and she said, I've got them all here. And she had them on her shelf. And I'm like, Mr. Stay, you've made it. So yeah, you've got fans everywhere, Mark. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
She's been very supportive, actually, very supportive.
She's lovely, yeah.
Fantastic, yeah. And we have a public declaration from Steve Gowland. Steve, fantastic fancy offer, writes as SC Gowland. So he says, I will complete The Midnight Warriors in time for its release date, 26th of January 2024. Gulp, ... Now, the thing is, Steve, not only has he announced a release date, it's up for pre-order on Amazon as well. Amazing cover, too. Really, really cool cover. And again, I'll put a link in the show notes. Yeah, good luck, Steve. You've announced the date, and Amazon, if you miss that date, they get very cross. So you've got to make it. Go for it.
That is the ultimate dream declaration, isn't it? It's not just like telling us about it and getting it in the legendary Mr. Stay diary. It's actually whacking it up on Amazon with the release. I mean, there's no holding back. So maybe, okay, what do we call that, Mark? We have to give that, or maybe Suzie, what kind of ninja level kind of dream declaration is that when you actually literally publish it on Amazon?
Well, it's got to be. You said ninja level there. It's got to be black belt, hasn't it?
Black belt dream declaration. Thank you very much. Excellent. There you go.
So thanks everyone for sending that in. If you have any wins, you can find us on social media. Get in touch. So we are on Facebook, Bestseller Experiment, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. We are at Bestseller XP. Are you on Threads yet, Suzie? Are you doing Threads? Yeah.
Yes. I keep forgetting that it's there.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Every so often I do go on there and see the same people that I see on Instagram. But,
Yeah, exactly. And I've managed to get on Blue Sky as well. And it's one of these things.
You got a code.
I got a code. I should try and get some for Bestseller Experiment as well.
Do you know that's how Gmail started off? Codes.
Yeah.
You remember that? Codes, Gmail started off where you had to get an invite, and you got like 10 invites. I got to say, we're talking with a historian here, so I'm future casting myself 50 years in the future. And like, no one's going to have heard of any of these social media sites. Like, none of them are going to be around. We'll change names, or we'll probably all be doing it through AI, brain chips or something, and there won't even be an interface that we have to look at. But it's fascinating, isn't it? I'm curious. I'm very curious as to who's going to win, because they can't all these different social media sites can't all be with us in a couple of years from now.
We'll all just have a big chip in our brain in a few years. Don't worry, it's coming. So yes, do drop us a line there, folks. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, if you've been inspired by Suzie and the authors that we've had on the show, give us a rating, subscribe to us, give us a review wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks as always to our editors, Dave and JD.
Yeah, and just a quick reminder, folks, Suzie's been supporting this podcast for donkey's years as a patron. So we are very, very grateful. So if you want to be like Suzie, pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support, get all of the extra goodies. I also just want to mention as well, to remind people that if you are interested, if you've been inspired by Suzie today and you are interested in writing a non-fiction book, I'm going to be doing this over the next, I say year, 12 to 14 months. And you can join me in the Bestseller Academy in writing your nonfiction book. We're going to be going through this together, folks. You're going to be getting life coaching from me, and you're going to be getting nonfiction coaching from the amazing Kate Harrison, who's sold over 1 million books. So if you'd like to find out more about that, pop along to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. And there's also the 200 word challenge. Suzie, did you toyed with the 200 word challenge in your time?
Yes. However, like diet and exercise and everything else, I get about 4 days in, and then I don't write every day.
It's hard though, isn't it? And that's why we have the challenge. So if you want to join that, it's 200wordchallenge.com. Our challenge to everyone out there is, can you write consecutively 200 words for 7 days? And if you can do that, then hey, you might be onto a bit of momentum. And it isn't as easy as it sounds, folks, as Suzie testifies, as I know. Mark, I think you pretty much cracked it, haven't you, a few years back?
Yeah, but it's all I do.
I know.
I might interject actually and say that I probably do in terms of creating online content for TikTok and all the rest. I probably do that. Yeah. So I do that every day, every single day.
We all text more than 200 words a day if you count them up. It's quite
WhatsApp.
amazing. Yeah, exactly, right? We're writing bloody novels on text and WhatsApp, but we got nothing on the other end of it. Brilliant stuff. Well, again, thank you so much, Suzie, for being with us. Absolute delight to have you with us, and we look forward to having you back on very, very soon. And so it's a goodbye from Suzie.
Goodbye.
And it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And goodbye from Mark 2. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Zoom wave, everyone. Zoom wave.
Zoom wave.